All right, you guys, I wanted to do part 2 of chapter 15. It has to do with the bureaucrats, so the people within the federal government and state government. So this covers pages 468 to 476. So with the bureaucrats, there are definitely some myths and then some realities as well. So let's go over some myths and then I'll give you some numbers and facts. So a couple of popular myths are things like Americans dislike them, that they are growing bigger and bigger each year, that they all work in Washington, D.C., and that they're ineffective, inefficient, and always kind of bogged down in, red tape. All right, so that is a little bit false, those things there. So why do these myths come about? Well, this is because bureaucrats tend to be less visible than, for example, the president or members of Congress. So what ends up happening is people end up blaming other people for problems. I'm sure you have never heard of that before. So that's kind of where those myths come about. The truth is, most Americans don't dislike bureaucrats. Most of us don't think of them as bureaucrats. For example, your friendly postal worker, they are bureaucrats, but you probably never think of them as such. The other thing is the idea that it's growing bigger and bigger each year. So your textbook is about 20 years old, give or take, and the notes I have from that says there are about 4.2 million civilian and military workers in the federal bureaucracy. And I just Googled that number to kind of find it out and see the update, and it's about 4 million. So it actually has dropped a little bit, give or take. And some of those categories may have changed over time, but just, it's definitely not growing every single year. Another idea is, within that number of 4 million, just so you kind of have a feel for it, that includes 1.4 million soldiers, airmen, Marines, people in the military, our servicemen and women, about 1.2 million civilians who work for the military, so in different types of jobs, secretarial, office managers, I can't even think of all the jobs, but just different things for the military. And so just to keep that in mind, our military is a huge part of that number. Another myth is that most of them work in Washington, D.C. It's only about 10%. So again, the postal office, they're all across, right? You guys have one here in Dixon. There's 3 in Vacaville. Like, those are all bureaucrats. So only about 10% total live and work in D.C. And then the idea that they're ineffective, inefficient, and you're down with red tape. So yes, there can be some inefficiencies and whatnot. It's not always the employees that you interact with. It's not always their fault. So for example, the post office. I do love your Dixon post office, by the way. The workers there are so nice and helpful. But for example, the head honchos at the top of the postal service have made some changes to try to, make it more cost effective, and that has made a change on their efficiency. So, the people working in front of you that you interact with aren't always the people making the decisions. So one thing to note is that the bureaucrats, when you look at them as a whole, that 4 million people, they tend to be more diverse than other areas of the government. So they tend to reflect America as a whole better. So for example, if you think about the presidents over time, right? We've had one Black president. That's not indicative of our American culture. Also, like our judges, like just think about the Supreme Court, right? Okay, it's gotten a little better over the years, but still heavily white male. So those are just some things to think about, is that it's not perfect for sure, but it does have some kind of good things if you look for them. All right, so a couple things going about who they are and how they got there. So civil service. So this has evolved. I mentioned this in class a little bit, and it's really evolved over the last 150 years or so. Previously, there was what's called the spoils system, and this was pretty big during the post-Civil War era. And this is where the presidents would just staff their friends and allies within the government. So this has been outdated and is no longer used. Patronage is it's more of an official term of getting, but it's more like you get hired because you know the right people. So that could be, for example, like we always would joke, my dad was the mayor, and my husband was always like, oh, I guess I'll be the chief of San Rafael Fire one day. And my brother-in-law would be like, I'll be the chief of San Rafael Police. That would be an example of patronage, and also because they happen to be family. That word nepotism also kind of rings true right there as well. So just to keep that in mind, and that has been outdated. So most federal agencies are covered by some sort of civil service system that is put into place based on merit. And then this is the idea behind it, is to create a nonpartisan government service, right? We don't want our postal employees being one political party and skipping the homes of somebody who may get mail from the other political party. That would not be helpful to anyone at all. All right. So that is one of the big ideas as well. Okay. And then the Hatch Act. This came into play during the Republican National Convention when Secretary of State Pompeo was abroad during the convention, and he gave a speech in favor of President Trump. And he made it clear, he said, I am speaking to you tonight as, I can't remember, as Helen's husband and as Julie's father. Those aren't their real names, but he was saying he was talking as a private citizen. And some people were like, can you be a private citizen if you're a member of the cabinet? So one of those questionable things. But, it's the idea of doing active partisan politics while you're on duty. So he was saying, I'm not on duty. It's after hours. I've clocked out. But I know some eyebrows got raised on that, and that isn't the only time, but that's a recent example I can think of. All right. The Office of Personnel Management is in charge of hiring for most agencies of the federal government. So, you have to turn that in. I had a friend who applied for the State Department. She wanted to be to work abroad. I can't remember the exact job she was trying to get, but it was through the State Department, and it was very much a government regulated interview and application process. So just to kind of keep that in mind. Other federal jobs, like ways of recruiting other jobs, include something known as the Plum Book. So that could be lists of top federal jobs available for presidential appointment. And then, of course, the Senate has to confirm those. But every incoming president will launch a nationwide talent search to fill these positions. There's usually about 400 of them. Most will be like in and outers, which is a term to say that they will stay for a while and leave. And they pretty much will quickly learn that their senior civil servants know more, have been there longer, and will outlast them. So they're just kind of there for a very small time. Another just note, a civil service job is assigned to a general schedule rating. So again, these are just oversights in charge of making sure things are done properly. And the very top of the civil service system is the Senior Executive Service. So this is the group that is in charge. Oops, I apologize. I went a little out of order. I got a little excited there. So the Plum Book, here we've got a little bit of knowledge about the Plum Book. So again, this is kind of like the federal jobs available. It's kind of like, ed source here for teachers that we have. So presidential, and one important trait that they are about them is they're transient. So like they're able to kind of move on as needed. Okay, sorry, that got a little jumbled at the end. Well, as always, please let me know if you have any questions or specific things you need me to revisit in a more clear way. Apologize, I'm just kind of doing these to try to help out. So I'm definitely not trying to confuse you more. So let me know, you guys, but that's part 2. Thanks.